Hi guys, good morning. Welcome to another episode of Clangin and Bangin with Mikey, episode 276. And yeah, today, man, I don't know what we're gonna talk about. There's a whole bunch of shit we could talk about. I try to stay out of politics because it's just not really. It's like I pay attention to it, but it's like I'm not gonna beat you over the head with it if that makes any sense, right? Anyway, on a lighter note, my PS4 finally kicked the bucket on me. So that's some good coffee. So it finally kicked the bucket on me. I gotta go out there and get a PS5. So um, get one for my birthday. Cause I never really played it up until like consistently up until like maybe like 2 3 days ago, and I was playing Grand Theft Auto 5, and cause I knew I had the game, so I was looking for it and I found it. I feel okay. I'm gonna play this again, and so I ended up playing it the other night. I didn't get that far, and then when I got home yesterday, I wanted to play for a bit. So I go turn on the machine, and it clicks on, but the light doesn't stay on. And then I basically looked it up, and it was like, yeah, and it simply said like, oh, because the PS4 is so old that like the battery after a while just dies, you know, or like it can't complete its self turn on mechanisms, right? Which is true because it is, because I got this shit back in like 2015, so it's been like 11 years. So I don't expect it to last like 30, 40 years type of shit. I really don't, you know. And it's funny because I had the physical copy of the game, so and I tried to eject it, from turning it on, but it wouldn't stay on. So I'm like, oh shit, okay, well, like what do I do to get this out? And so I'm looking up the model number, and it tells me, it's like, oh well, how to manually eject the disk. There's like you have to remove the hard drive, and then you have to take a Phillips screw, and then you have to counterclockwise spin it until the game comes out. And so it took me a while to figure it out, but once I did, it was easy. And but yeah, all my friends would give me shit. They're like, ooh, it's time to upgrade, take it to the next level. Like, why are you still playing games on a PS4? And the other people were like, man, you 30 some odd years old, you still playing video games? I was like, why not? You know. Believe it or not, it's like I don't really drink much. You know, I don't really party as much as I used to party when I was younger. I got invited out to a couple spots last night. I ended up not going because they said they were gonna slide out at 9 o'clock. I'm like, 9 o'clock on a Saturday, bro. It was like, I'm like, homie, I'm in bed by like 10:30. And and one of the guys that was with us, he wanted to be home at 10. I'm like, bro, if you slide on out at 9, that means you're not getting home till like 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. And it's like I said, I don't drink, so like me being around a bunch of drunk people or a bunch of people who are inebriated, it isn't a good time for me. And people ask me why I don't I don't drink, and I was like, well, 100% of the time I'm driving somewhere, and I don't want to run the risk of drinking and driving and get into an accident or get in a DUI, and it's like, because your whole life is fucked up over, after that. And I seen a lot of people get DUIs, and like this shit is never the same. Well, I know this one guy. He got 4 DUIs. He can't drive for the rest of his life. Yeah, which is like it's crazy to me. Like when I found that out, like, cause like dude told me, and I'm like, how the fuck you get 4 DUIs? It's like, bro, I was just out there just being wild. And I thought that was always interesting too, because it's like when I was in my 20s, it's like a bunch of people I know, because we would go out every fucking weekend. And it got to the point where pretty much everybody I knew from that time frame was catching DUIs. Because what they would do, because there was a spot down the street from David Buster's. And so it was like this little place, they turned into a nightclub for Saturday nights. Place was kind of cool, man. I ain't gonna lie, it was cool. And so you park in the parking structure, and a lot of people, like, this is back in the day when you had to manually turn your headlights on. That little switch on the left hand side that you twist to the left, to turn your lights on. A lot of guys would forget to turn their lights on because you're in a parking structure that's hella lit. And right outside the parking structure, down the block, as soon as you pull out, there's a bunch of cop cars. So cops would wait for the club to close, wait for the cars to come out, pull every single one over, one at a time. Because they would pull them over for, not having the headlights on or some sort of infraction, right? So anyway, that's a lot of the guys I knew who caught DUIs. And we were young. We was like 21, 22. We were babies. And I just never thought that was a good thing, because it's like, I had a friend, an older friend who more like a mentor. He was a lawyer, and he was like, bro, he's like, whatever you do, man, is like you don't want to you never want to catch a DUI. And I was like, because I'm thinking that it's just a fine and everything too. He's like, no, it's a felony. What they'll do, they'll slap you with a fine, they'll throw you in jail, and then you got to bail yourself out. Then you got to go to court for all that stuff. But it's like if you get more than one DUI, it's considered habitual. And I didn't understand what that meant, because I'm young. I ain't like I said, I'm 21, 22, and this brother like he's in his 50s or his 60s at this time, right? And he was telling me like what they'll do, like, let's say you get one DUI. I think back in the day that was like $500 to get out of jail, And let's say you get another, a second DUI. Not only do you get your license taken away for 6 months, not only do you have to do the insurance and everything with SR22 or SR24, I think it is, and that insurance rate is fucking insanely expensive, because you're insuring a driver convicted of drunk driving, so their liability. And on top of that, it's like, so every time you got a DUI, the fines will go up, and the amount of money it costs to go to court goes up too. And the more DUIs you get, the longer they take away your license for. And anything after 4 DUIs, you get your license taken away for life. As I got older, I figured that out. Because like I said, a lot of guys around me, guys that grew up with, were catching DUIs. Or guys I was with, I'm talking like they were full-blown alcoholics. Like, they had, these niggas had to get up and, as soon as they get up, they had to drink something, to cure the hangover. And that just never was really my move. So, like, whenever I go out, I always have water, maybe a little food or something, but I never drink, because it's like, I don't understand, running the risk of losing your life, losing your job, getting arrested, all for a few drinks. And another story behind that is like this one girl I dated in college. We went out a handful of times, and her mom told me something on the second date, and she said, "Mike, no drinking and driving." I was like, "Yeah, auntie, I got it, no worries." And she's like, "No, like, no drinking and driving. Tell me you won't drink and drive." I was like, "Auntie, yeah, I promise I won't." And then she told me the story, and I'll never forget it. It was her little brother, I believe he was in high school, and he got killed by a drunk driver. And so when that happened, um, she made it a point to always tell her daughter's boyfriends or whoever they were seeing at that particular time, like, yo, you know, you know, don't drink and drive. And after hearing that story, um, it always stuck with me, man. It's like it always stuck with me, you know. And but on another note, what I also want to talk about is how important it is to have boundaries. It's amazing to me how much people don't have boundaries. You know, it's amazing to me how people will just go through life and like think, and like not have anything set up for them, for the other person to be like, oh well, um, I ran across this reel the other day, and this young cat was talking about how, what did he say? He was talking about how like a lot of people, he was talking about boundaries, and he was talking about like how a lot of people would say, oh, please don't talk to me like that way, boom, 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 boom. And he's like, that's not really a boundary. And mind you, young fella's in high school. He looks like he's in high school. And so when he says that, and he goes on to explain it, it made sense, you know, because he was like, yo, like, that's not a boundary. Like, you're literally asking somebody not to talk to you that way. A boundary is, you know, is you telling somebody else is like, hey, like if you do A, B, if you do A, I'm gonna do B, and I'm gonna see my way out, out the conversation, out the relationship, right? Like, and that's not a threat. That's more along the lines of you telling somebody like, don't do X, Y, and Z, or else, if you do X, Y, and Z, we're done after this, right? And you'll give them a reason as to why. A lot of the times, and not to sound sexist, but women will say like, oh, well, like these are my boundaries. And in reality, it's not really a boundary, Like you may think it's a boundary, you may think that it's, that's you implementing a boundary, but it's like, how would I put this? It's like you saying, oh, I don't like the fact that you go out every Friday night with your girls, and like all you guys get drunk. Please don't do that, because if you do that, if you come on drunk one more time, or if you're driving drunk, we're over. Like we're done. Because it's a safety issue, right? Like that's a boundary. You know what I mean? And that's like you telling the girl like, hey, I'd much rather have you call me than have you guys drive drunk. I'd much rather you guys leave somebody's car in the structure or whatever it is, or leave it wherever you're at, or I'll have somebody come with me and like drive your car home. That's a boundary. That's because you're telling somebody, don't do this and I won't do that, because that's what it is. It's like you're giving them clarity, like, oh, if you keep doing X, Y, and Z, this is what's gonna happen. Or it's like I've been in relationships and in situations where people want to be like, well, I told you not to do X, Y, and Z, but you did it anyway, so we're done. I'm like, how can I violate a boundary if I didn't know a boundary existed? Just because you say you don't do something doesn't mean that it's a boundary. It's not, because you're not providing clarity as to what's gonna happen. When you don't provide clarity to a situation, it's like you can't get mad when somebody violates a boundary. Yeah, it's like I remember this one girl. We went out for dinner once, and she said something like, "Oh, something, something, something," and I go, "Well, if I told her if I violate a boundary, let me know." And she's like, "Well, how could you violate a boundary if I didn't say anything?" I was like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah, Shit, how can I violate it? Violate a boundary, or how can you violate a boundary, or vice versa if nothing was said? You have to provide clarity in that situation. And it's true. A lot of people will sit there, and especially women, they'll be like, "Oh well, like these are my boundaries, this and this and that." And and I'm like, "Oh, it's not really a boundary." It's like you're just asking for basic human decency. Like you're asking somebody, "Oh, please don't talk to me like that." You know, that's not a boundary. That's you putting, that's you asking somebody to respect you and respect your space. That's not a boundary. You know, like having to tell somebody, please don't talk to me that way. It's not a boundary. That's basic human decency, and a lot of people will get that screwed up. Like they'll sit there and they'll talk about X, Y, and Z. In reality, it's like, bro, it's like, no, it's not. It's like this is not something that you can just be like, oh yeah, you know, because it just doesn't work that way. It's not something where you can just like, oh yeah, you know, oh that's the boundary. Oh, let me not, let me not step on toes, you know. Or it's like I've been in relationships where it's like, um, women will try to withhold, intimacy, public displays of affection, and I'm like, yo, that's not a boundary. That's you not committing to this. It's not. Just because you don't want to, display uh public affection, it doesn't mean that that's a boundary. That's you not being comfortable. Whether you're not comfortable with me, whether you're not comfortable with the situation, is like at the end of the day, you're not comfortable. Period. So that's why you're saying what you're saying. It has nothing to do with a quote unquote boundary. It has nothing to do with anything else going on. It's like my thing is like I have a very addictive personality. Like when I like something, I like something. Hence why I was a competitive bodybuilder. Addictive personality. And it worked out in that in that way. I'm also the type of dude, believe it or not, who's really romantic. But it takes levels to get to that version of me, right? You know, my ex girlfriend in the very beginning thought I was an asshole. She wasn't wrong. She wasn't. But like I said, it takes some effort to get down, to get down to those lower levels, to get down to, you know, the levels where I actually feel safe with you, because I don't invite a lot of people into my space. That's never been my thing. And me personally, it's what if I'm comfortable with you in my space, I'm gonna invite you in my space 20, 25/8. You know, I'm gonna want you around all the time. You know, and if I'm dealing with a woman, and let's say let's say that she's got that access to me, I'm gonna want sex all the time. Because that's how I communicate, right? You know, intimacy, the physical part of it, everything too, right? If I don't feel comfortable around you, I'll still interact with you, but I won't go out of my way to, make plans. I won't text a lot. I won't call. I won't do a lot of things like that because why would I be in constant contact with somebody I don't trust? You know? And for me, that's one of my boundaries. It's like I don't say much, but I observe. And when I observe and I'm like, oh, okay, all this shit don't add up. You know, all this shit don't make any sense. And I slowly start to remove myself. Um, I had a girl once. I knew her since college. And we kind of had a moment, you know, fleeting, you know, whatever it was. And like a month or so later, like she's texting, she's calling, you know, she's FaceTiming me, asking me all this shit, you know, asking me like trying, you know, just trying to like extract information from me, right? You know, trying to make me, you know, be comfortable. And the thing about that that turned me off about that situation was that I didn't like how she talked to a kid. You know, I didn't like how she reacted to stress. You know, how she just kind of flipped off the handle and she said, you know, some disparaging shit. And another part of me that kind of made me reevaluate the situation was we was on a FaceTime call and her daughter goes, "Hey mom, you should marry him because he seems like a nice guy." And I'm like, okay, this is weird. You know. And then mind you, the girl who's been my friend since college, she said, "Yeah, you know, well, he is a nice guy." And so she ends up telling me the situation of what she went through and everything too. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And she's like, "What you mean?" It's like, that makes sense as to why your daughter said what she said. You know, nobody says that, you know, without a reason as to why they're saying it. And but to hear that, that never made me uncomfortable. You know, I get it because kids love me. You know, it's like I'm the dude that, you know, every single girl I've dated who has kids, the kids always ask about me. You know, so I've always made it a point like, yo, like I'm always here if you need me. Let me know. You know, you want me to show up to X, Y, and Z, I'll be there. Just give me enough time to be there. Or just give me enough heads up, and I'll show up. I'm never gonna turn away, you know, to be a healthy role model for somebody else's kid. That's because me and the, you know, like me and the mom didn't work out. I'm never gonna do that. I think it's stupid that there are men out there like that who do that. And then they want to sit there and be like, "Oh well, I wanted X, Y, and Z, so since I didn't get X, Y, and Z, like nobody gets it." Like, man, shut the fuck up, bro. You a weirdo, bro. Like straight up, you a weirdo. You know. And then the topic of kids always comes up, and people ask me all the time. They're like, "Yo, why aren't you a dad, bro? You be great at it." I'm like, man, like there's a difference between being that cool uncle and being somebody else who's in charge of raising somebody from day one to day, you know, to the day that I die. It's like there's a difference, you know. I can be the cool uncle all day long because I know, okay, I've only got to see them X amount of days for X amount of hours, and after that I'm cool. But on the flip side, once you're a dad, bro, like your whole life becomes what that kid wants to do, you know? And not that it scares me, but like what frightens me is having kids with the wrong person. You know, what frightens me is like having a kid with somebody who's not on the same mental wavelength that I'm on, who doesn't have the same goals that I am. You know, that I'm on. And it's like Trip Fontaine famously said something. He's like, "Yo, like be getting people fucked up, like be getting people pregnant, like be getting people, you know, people into relationships that they have no business in." Like you know, like be getting people to marry the wrong individual, you know. So there's a lot of shit that like will do that will have you fucked up, you know, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that some people just they don't they don't want to admit or they don't want to come to terms with, yo, like you're the cause of this shit, you know. And to me, that's sad that people can sit there and like create a life with somebody and then like not really know the other person. Um, because believe it or not, just because we have the ability to procreate doesn't mean we should. You know. I knew somebody who, they got a couple kids, and but the age gap is like 7, 8 years age gap or some shit like that. And I'm like, 8 years, and she's like, yeah, I didn't want the second kid. I'm like, oh, then why'd you have another kid? You know, I mean, that's that's kind of crazy. And and I just look at that and I think like, damn, it's like, you know, imagine being with somebody who didn't want kids and you want kids. I've seen that too, where like people have gotten married and then they find out after they've gotten married that the other individual doesn't want kids. I'm like, well, you should have had that conversation before you even had the conversation to get married. You know, because as I've gotten older, like the conversations that I had, with women who I'm in a relationship with, I'm like, okay, look, how are we gonna handle finances? How are we gonna handle, if we have kids, or if you already have kids, how do you want me to be in that role? Like in terms of disciplining them, in terms of doing X, Y, and Z. And when I say discipline, I don't mean physically disciplining them. I mean disciplining them in terms of how do we handle conflict? How do we handle X, Y, and Z? Because at the end of the day, it's like if you don't have those, if you don't have that clarity, that's how people can get screwed up. That's how people can get everything miscombobulated and they can become befuddled. Um, and I think that's the most important thing, man. Is like beginning people fucked up. Um, like beginning people, people like beginning people to get married to people within 6 months to a year. Hell, I've seen people get married and by the end of the year get divorced. You know, I've seen people have kids with somebody and go through hell because the person that they had kids with is like that individual, or he or she is just a shit individual. Or both parents are shit individuals. And they think that having a baby is gonna make the situation better, and it's not. And I just think it's sad, it's pathetic. And when I say it's pathetic, it's because the kid doesn't ask to be here. The child doesn't ask to be here. Child can't choose their parents, but their parents can choose, the kid's dad. So what I'm saying is that ask questions, learn how to handle conflict, learn how to navigate certain situations. And ladies, stop blaming a man for everything. Stop blaming the man for X, Y, and Z, because a lot of it has to do with you guys. A lot of it has to do with the fact that you guys don't don't want to take accountability. You guys rather sit there and blame everybody else, and you rather sit there and just, instead of taking accountability for something, you don't want to do anything, so you sit there and you blame him, not realizing that you're a part of the problem, not realizing that, yeah, he may have been the problem, but you being there didn't, contributing to X, Y, and Z didn't help either. And last thing, man, is that know when to walk away from a situation. Like I was telling a friend of mine last night, I was like, you can miss certain people, but then you got to remember why you're no longer with them. You got to remember everything that you put up with, all the bullshit that you dealt with. And I think, excuse me, I think that's the part where people get it twisted at, though. Like, they want to look at this through the honeymoon phases, and, through rose-colored glasses. And reality is like, not every situation is worth that, man. It's like you can't sit there and ignore the red flags and like be like, oh, an epiphany. Like, what are you talking about? Like, so and so was cheating on you the entire time. You know, and so it's just a really screwed up situation because people will sit there and, like I said, they won't come to terms with that they're the issue, and that's not something nobody has time for. You know, like, I'm sorry that you grew up in a fucked up situation. I'm sorry that every relationship you've been in, you've been the other woman, or you've been the other person that that wasn't chosen. Somebody else was chosen over you, and that sucks. But you know what? That has nothing to do with with what you're currently in. You know, and I think a lot of people will, instead of sitting there and trying to figure out why they keep going for the same type of woman or man, they want to sit there and they want to blame somebody else. In reality, it's like there's nobody to blame except you. Like, you're sitting there blaming somebody else. In reality, it's like the roles were equal. And the last thing that I want to hit on, which I should have hit on in the very beginning, never apologize just to keep the peace. I got a coworker, right? Young bull, he's in his mid-20s, and something happened with him and his girl. It was a miscommunication, and simply, like, he only heard part of the conversation. And then she goes, well, that's because you don't listen to me. And he's like, no, I just didn't hear you. I didn't hear the whole thing. I only heard part of it. And so he's telling me and another coworker, X, Y, and Z, what happened. And we asked him. I asked him, like, bro, are you always the one to apologize? He's like, yeah. I was like, oh, how long you guys been going out? He's like, oh, about 5 years. I was like, so you mean to tell me every time something popped off wrong, you apologize? He's like, yeah. It's like, yeah, I can understand why you feel a certain way because you're tired of taking the blame for something that wasn't your fault. That's not your fault. It was miscommunication. And I was like, bro, it's like, I would get tired of it too. I said, number one, that's tiresome to deal with that. And number two, my other coworkers said something, oh, well, like, just apologize to keep the peace, even when you did nothing wrong. I'm like, no. Like, why would you constantly apologize? Especially when you know that you did nothing wrong. You don't constantly apologize just to keep somebody else around. By you consistently apologizing, you're allowing the other person not to take accountability for their shitty behavior. And at the end of the day, it's like, I don't care who you are. It's like, you're not going to sit there and guilt trip somebody into taking accountability for something that's not even necessary. Especially when it was a miscommunication. And I say, bro, like, if she's not talking to you for whatever it is, then she's actually showing you who she really is, bro. And while that sucks, and I've been there, nobody deserves to be walked over. Nobody deserves to be, treated, less than such. I don't care who you are. Nobody. And I just told Young Bull, like, hey man, like, I think Safeway got flowers on sale for a Good Friday or $5 Friday. Just go out there, buy your girl a $10-15 bundle, and tell her straight up, like, yo, like, can we talk? Can we deal with this before this shit gets, so far gone that we end up breaking up over something stupid. Like, learn how to set boundaries. Learn how to, like, set healthy boundaries. because not talking to somebody, it it doesn't it doesn't make people want to talk to you. It makes them not want to talk to you. It's like I'm the type of person, I'm not going to sit there and have the same conversation with you several times. I'm not going to sit there and be X, Y, and Z with you because now I'm like, okay, bro, like this is the fourth or fifth, sixth time that we had the same conversation. You know, like, what do you want? Because you obviously don't want what I want. Like, I want a relationship with you. You want to go back to being friends. There's a disconnect. We can't do that because that's a boundary of mine. It's like I'm not gonna go back from being, being friends with my ex-girlfriend when I want something more. Why would I under benefit myself and over benefit you at the same time? It doesn't make any sense. So as a boundary for me, I'm gonna tell you exactly what I want, and I'm gonna let you know if I don't get it. I have to stop being available to you because of this. I said because it's not fair for me to be available for you thinking it's gonna go somewhere and I know that it's not. That's a boundary for me because that's stupid. I know what you want, which is a friendship to go back to being friends, and I don't want that. So I have to leave that alone. I'm not saying that we can't be friends in the future, but it's foolish for you to sit there and think that we can be friends right now. That's not gonna happen. And so, like I was telling the young boo, I was like, bro, it's like, no, never apologize for doing something that for something that you didn't do. And if somebody's telling you apologize just to keep the peace, that's a toxic ass relationship. That's a definition of a toxic relationship. Because once you do that, and that's the reason why his girl's acting the way he is, because he's done that the entirety of that relationship. I was like, bro, I was like, yeah. Like, you've done that the entirety of your relationship, so she's already been conditioned to think, oh, I can just show my ass. And he just gonna apologize because that nigga weak. That's basically what she's saying. You know? And that's why I told him, I was like, bro, it's like, just go out there and buy her $10-15 bundle of flowers, and be like, look, can we talk? Can we talk about what the issue is? You know, can we talk about what caused you to think I wasn't listening to you or whatever it is? Because there's a disconnect. And if she wants to talk, cool. If she doesn't want to talk, that's cool too. So. One thing about me, man, is like you're not gonna force me to have a conversation with you. By applying pressure that way, it doesn't work. All that does is make me want to distance myself further from you. And I have no problem doing that because I'm not gonna sit here and have the same conversation with somebody and think that everything's gonna be on the up and up. No. If you chase me to have a conversation with me, just because you smiling, just because you having a moment, it's not gonna work. Cause I'm gonna look at you and be like, damn, okay, like this is what we gonna do because you're smiling, like you gonna act a certain way, and it's not worth it, man. Anyway, it's about 40 minutes of your life that y'all won't get back. Hope y'all keeping the 4 P's. Private player, positive pushing. I'll see y'all next week Sunday. I love y'all. Like I always say, know your worth because you're better than what you are. All right, y'all. Have a beautiful Sunday. Happy Easter. Happy Easter. And spend time with your loved ones. And y'all have a blessed Sunday. Peace.